Hello everyone and welcome to this PCG tutorial on how to create an automotive environment. So we'll start off with the lighting. So we may need to change this later on, but as we have a pretty much empty scene at the moment, let's drag in our lighting presets and we'll load the default environment. So as you may have seen in our other videos, you can simply just swap the preset of the lighting and you can get a completely different vibe for your scene. So we'll just flick through to maybe sunny day now, load that up, and obviously it's a lot more brighter. Um, with these settings, as obviously we don't have any foliage, we don't have any real landscape, we don't have anything in the scene at the moment. So we're probably going to come back to this later on and do some minor adjustments. But for now, I think this morning preset is going to work quite nicely. So let's sculpt our environment. And we can do this really basic as we don't need to spend much time on this as the landscape material and the actual scatterable meshes we're using will really go a long way here. And the reason we're adding and subtracting parts of the landscape is just to keep it optimized, as obviously we're going to be scattering a lot of meshes here and we're only focusing on the hero foreground really. And we're not going to discuss too much the landscape tools here, as there's plenty of other tutorials online, but we're just going to flatten out and smooth an area where we're actually going to put the car. And I think what's really great about the landscape is even a simple landscape like this, which is sculpted in a few minutes, you can really bring alive when you start adding trees and rocks and grass, that kind of elements to the scene. Cool. So we've added a basic landscape shader and we're just adding some backdrop mountains now as well. And there's plenty of different resources for these, including Quixel Bridge also has some mountain assets. So it just helps you to add a bit of extra detail in the background. And now we're just going to be sculpting some rivers in the valley. And as you can see, we've got water underneath, and that is just a plain currently. And there is plenty of different ways to get water in your scenes, whether it's a plane with a water material or you use the water plugin, which is built inside of Unreal. Let's just add our post-processing and start tweaking some of the settings here as well. And now let's move on to PCG and really start to bring the scene alive. So what we're doing now is you can see we have two materials which are painted onto the landscape. And we're going to be using our multi-biome system here. So you'll be able to see in a moment that technically we'll actually have three materials. We have material A, B, and C. So you'll see in a moment when we actually enable the system. So we hit configure. You should see that there'll be three different biomes pasted onto the landscape. So there we have it. So we have the default forest, we have a bit more of a dead kind of forest, and we have snow. And obviously these are just the preset meshes and you can completely change these based on your own wishes. And what we've done now then is we've just swapped out some of the meshes in the mesh sets for each of these configurations. And as you can see, we've got a bit more detail in the scene now. So for the rocky biome, we've basically removed the trees and we've added rocks, and it will just allow us to basically paint on where we want these details. So in the river, we're going to use D, which is more of a wet kind of mossy material. And this will help with the water. And once again, like we're using a very simple landscape shader here. So if you have one with, more complex components, such as distance-based tiling, all of this will still work. But this is just for the sake of the video. And obviously, we don't want meshes spawning in the river, especially not trees and grass and things like that. So we're going to add path cuts all over the river just by simply dragging. And if you do need a new point, you can hold Alt and move the movement tool. So we'll just do that really quickly. And when we generate our systems a bit later on in the video, then the rivers won't have any meshes inside of them. Cool. So now we've done that, let's start by getting some actual systems in the scene. So let's get a large assembly, and we're going to use this for the cliff faces on the edge of the riverbank. So let's just swap our meshes. And the great thing about this system is once we've made one and we're happy with it, we can just duplicate it and we'll get a completely new version. There we go. It's looking quite nice, and let's just adjust some of the settings here. Cool. Now we have the one system, as I was saying previously. We can just duplicate these along and we'll get a completely new system based on the seed. So although your base mesh will be the same, all the scatterable objects on top will be completely unique. And feel free, to go out and swap one of the base meshes, and then you really will have a unique system. So it's really great to be able to layer these kind of systems up. And in a later release, we'll actually have a spline-based cliff system. So it'll work exactly the same, but you can just draw where you want your cliffs and it'll follow the spline. So things like this will be way, way quicker. And speaking of spline-based systems, we'll actually go to our path generator now. And even though it is a path generator, we're going to use it as a road in this particular scene. So we'll have the car over the top of it, and we'll lead this up the mountain a bit. And as you can see, there's actually landscape deformation on this path generator. So where the spline is, it will raise the path, or it will decrease the height. So if we disable that, you'll see the meshes, when they regenerate, will now be back onto the landscape, no matter where the spline is. And I think that's what we want for this scene. We don't really want to deform the landscape. So let's create a really rough path. And as you can see, although the spline's beneath the landscape, the meshes are still scattering on top of the landscape. And there we have it. So obviously we're going to need to do some tweaks for this, as the meshes we will need to swap, and then the width for the path and the actual density in meshes, all that will need to change. So as you can see, we've removed the tree meshes and we're just going for more of like a road and like bushes, grass, that kind of stuff. And the other thing as well, it's completely up to the user what kind of PCG system they do use first. As you know, you might want your forest first and then have a path to cut through it. Whereas in our case, we've actually drawn our road first. And although PCG is great, and so is Nano, you have to remember we are in a games engine. So spawning millions and millions and millions of polygons and trees, or foliage elements at one given time can be quite laggy. So that's where the PCG billboard system comes in. So it's super lightweight meshes which can be used in the background of your scenes. So it's particularly for this kind of scene, we're never going to be moving into the far distance. So we can just use billboards, and you can spawn millions of these at a given time and it won't really affect your performance. And there is a few tree billboards specifically which have been provided in the toolkit. So as you can see, we're going to draw over the larger areas of the landscape where we're not actually going to be accessing as a user. So it's really handy, as these trees in particular are really great. And if you were using like a desert, for example, for your biome, then maybe you'd have cactuses or rocks on your billboards. Like, it's completely up to you. But yeah, especially with transparent materials such as trees, grass, these can be really, really handy for the backdrops. Cool. So now you can see we've got our billboards in the scene. And currently we only have one version, but we'll fix that. And you'll notice that the path was actually despawning a little bit then, and that's due to the culling. So we will actually have to jump into the systems here, and we'll just increase the cull distance on each of these static mesh spawners. So by default, these have been set to quite low values, and that's to help with performance. But obviously, if you can see your path going all the way up a landscape, for example, you will need to increase this. And as you can see here, we just generated the actual biome, and we did it in more of a small area rather than a larger one. As I was saying before, if you try and generate a full biome over a large landscape like this one, it can cause crashes. And we're just going to add a few decals then to our scene. So what this will do is help us really, sell the illusion that this car is just driven up onto this path. Let's just do some manual placement as well. And I think that's what's really great with PCG. Like, you can have a really detailed biome to begin with, and then you can kind of tell a story with manually placed assets. Cool. And let's just regenerate our biome. And then we'll move our spline layer. And let's generate a new one. And then we'll create a stamp in a moment. So as you can see, we have a stamp here. We generated a new system, and then we'd stamp it again. And this is how you can really, create large biomes with just the small kind of spline area. So instead of generating the whole thing at once, you generate little segments, and you can, have all this detail without blowing your computer up, essentially. And it's just about doing the last finishing touches now, really. So we'll add in a few of these rocks around, and the scene's really getting there. And there we have it. So thanks for watching this tutorial, and we will see you in the next one.